The streets of Medellin were alive with the hum of motorbikes and the chatter of street vendors. Young Alonso Vargas darted through narrow alleys, clutching a small satchel, careful not to draw attention. He had learned early that the city's wealth and danger were two sides of the same coin. While the rich thrived in their fortified neighborhoods, those like him had to fight for every peso. Alonso's childhood friend, Carmen Rios, waited by the corner. Her sharp eyes scanned the street as she nudged him forward. She had grown up alongside Alonso, knowing his ambition and the fire that refused to die, even when opportunities were scarce. Together, they had scavenged, hustled, and dreamed of more than the poverty that surrounded them. "Today's the day," Carmen said, her voice low but steady. "We make our first move that counts." Alonso nodded, feeling the weight of both excitement and fear. He remembered the nights he had spent watching the city from the rooftops, imagining a life where he controlled his own destiny. That life seemed closer now than ever before. In the early years, Alonso had skirted the edges of petty crime, learning how to negotiate, intimidate, and survive. But Medellin was no forgiving school. Mistakes were expensive. Rival gangs operated with ruthless efficiency, and corrupt officials could be persuaded or coerced to look the other way. It was in this unforgiving environment that Alonso began crafting a strategy, one that balanced cunning with calculated risk. His first major challenge came from Luis Mendoza, a local politician known for his under-the-table dealings. Luis had connections to several small gangs, and his influence could either make Alonso's rise swift or end it before it began. Carmen, ever pragmatic, advised caution, suggesting they offer Luis a share in their operations, a gesture that could secure protection and vital contacts. The plan unfolded over weeks. Alonso and Carmen orchestrated a small but bold delivery operation, bypassing rival territories with careful timing. Every movement was calculated: who would watch the street, when to cross, and how to avoid the scrutiny of police patrols. Luis observed from the shadows, impressed by the audacity and precision. It was not long before he extended a discreet hand of approval, signaling a rare opportunity to form an alliance. With Luis's support, Alonso's reputation began to grow. Small-time dealers sought his guidance, recognizing both his intelligence and his willingness to enforce his rules without hesitation. Carmen stayed by his side, balancing his ambition with practical advice, ensuring that their rise did not spiral into reckless danger. But the streets were unforgiving. Rivals noticed the changes in power dynamics, and whispers of betrayal began to circulate. Alonso learned to read the nuances of these warnings: a hesitation in a handshake, a flicker of doubt in an ally's gaze, a sudden absence from routine meetings. Trust became currency, and betrayal could be deadly. His first taste of true power came one humid evening when a rival gang attempted to hijack a shipment crucial to Alonso's budding empire. The confrontation was swift and precise. Alonso, flanked by loyal friends and a small band of new recruits, outmaneuvered the attackers. Violence erupted, but his control was undeniable. Word spread across Medellin. Alonso Vargas was not a boy anymore. He was a force to be reckoned with. That night, Carmen and Alonso stood atop the roof of a warehouse, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. "This is only the beginning," Carmen murmured. Alonso felt the thrill of potential, but also the creeping shadow of risk. The empire he dreamed of was still fragile, and every decision carried weighty consequences. As the moon dipped behind the skyline, Alonso promised himself one thing: no matter the cost, he would rise. The streets of Medellin were his proving ground, and soon the world would take notice. The first chapter of his ascent had been written, and the next would be far more daring, far more dangerous, and far more defining. Medellin had changed. The city's heartbeat pulsed with a new rhythm, one dictated by the ambitions of Alonso Vargas. Once a boy scrambling through alleys, he now walked streets where whispers of his name inspired both fear and admiration. The empire he had begun with Carmen and the cautious blessing of Luis Mendoza had grown into a sprawling network that controlled shipments, distribution, and alliances across the city. Alonso's office overlooked the central district, a room filled with maps, ledgers, and the faint smoke of imported cigars. Carmen stood by a window, arms crossed, scanning the streets below. She had matured alongside Alonso's empire, navigating the growing tension between power and morality. She knew every risk, every betrayal waiting to surface in a world where loyalty was rare and fleeting. The first sign of trouble came in the form of Rafael Ortega, a rival who had been quietly building his own faction in the western sector. Ortega's influence had grown silently. Small attacks on shipments escalated into bold acts of defiance, sending a clear message. "He's testing us," Alonso said, leaning over a map marked with red and blue territories. "He wants to see if fear can shake our foundation." Carmen nodded. "Then we give him something stronger than fear. We give him certainty. They will know crossing us costs everything." With precision, Alonso orchestrated countermeasures. Every shipment, every handoff was scrutinized. Spies infiltrated Ortega's operations. One night, a daring ambush on one of Ortega's key convoys sent word across Medellin that Alonso Vargas was untouchable. Amid the chaos, Isela Fernandez, a tenacious journalist, began piecing together reports of Alonso's operations. She moved carefully, aware that one wrong step could cost her life. Her articles hinted at a shadow city ruled by power, wealth, and fear. Internal tension began to rise as well. Ricardo Silva, a young enforcer, started questioning the costs of their operations. Alonso noticed Ricardo's hesitation, understanding that leadership required balancing fear with inspiration, brutality with loyalty. Then came the night that would define the Empire's future. A convoy carrying a critical shipment was ambushed near the city outskirts. Alonso moved swiftly. They turned the ambush into a trap, cutting off Ortega's men and reclaiming the shipment. Despite victory, the cost weighed heavily. Carmen reminded Alonso that power demanded sacrifice, that each victory carved scars into their souls. Meanwhile, Colonel Esteban Duarte intensified his pursuit. A man of methodical determination, he worked quietly to dismantle Alonso's network. One evening, atop the roof of his office, Alonso looked out over Medellin. Carmen approached silently. "We've built something no one else could." The city slept uneasily beneath the weight of Alonso Vargas's empire. He held dominion, aware that every empire has a heartbeat, fragile and unstoppable. Medellin had grown restless. The streets that once bowed to Alonso Vargas now whispered with unease. His empire, built with cunning, loyalty, and violence, faced the inevitable pressure of its own weight. Rivals lurked in the shadows, allies wavered, and law enforcement tightened the noose that had been quietly closing around him. Colonel Esteban Duarte had become relentless. He had studied Alonso for months, mapping his operations. Inside his fortified compound, Alonso moved like a ghost. Paranoia had settled into his bones. Carmen, always vigilant, noticed the toll it took on him. She feared that the empire itself was consuming the man who had built it. "They are closing in," Carmen said quietly. "It's no longer just Ortega or the street gangs, the law, the media. They all wait for a single misstep." Alonso nodded, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "Then we make the misstep impossible. We control everything until there's nothing left to control. But control is an illusion." Ricardo Silva, once a devoted enforcer, had begun questioning his loyalty. Quietly, he began feeding information to Duarte, creating fissures that Alonso could neither see nor predict. Isela Fernandez, a determined journalist typing on a laptop surrounded by notes, her work revealed the human cost of his reign. The climax arrived on a rain-soaked night when Alonso's compound was finally breached. Duarte, with a team of precision operatives, descended. The ensuing confrontation was chaotic. Gunfire echoed through halls, loyalists fell, and Alonso moved with desperation. Cornered in the main courtyard, Alonso faced Duarte. "This is the end," Duarte said. Alonso's voice was calm. "Perhaps, or perhaps it is merely the beginning of a story they will tell, without knowing its full truth." He surrendered, but in the streets of Medellin, his name did not vanish. Whispers of Alonso Vargas persisted. Medellin moved forward, scarred and resilient. The empire had crumbled, yet the city itself bore the mark of his presence. The legend of Alonso Vargas endured, a shadow over Medellin, a story of ambition, loyalty, betrayal, and the inescapable price of greatness.